Before we start today's video, we want to bring you a word from our fantastic sponsor, Seeker's Notes. Seeker's Notes is an exciting and addictive hidden object game that I'm currently obsessed with. The game takes place in the cursed city of Darkwood. Your job is to solve the puzzles and save the citizens from the horrible curse. Seeker's Notes is celebrating its 5th anniversary, and in honor of that, they are having a special promotion. They are giving away 50 Amazon vouchers worth $10 US. To enter the random draw, all you have to do is post a screenshot that shows you've reached level 11 and your game ID on their Facebook page before the end of the contest date. The contest is one good reason to check out Seeker's Notes, but you should also download it because it's a lot of fun. The puzzles start off easy, but as your skills develop, they get more complicated. Besides hidden object games, they also have a bunch of fun mini-games. Seeker's Notes visuals are stunning, and the storyline is also riveting. Plus, every month there's a new patch with new content, so there's always new material to play, so it never gets boring. Also, if you like to play with others, they have guilds and guild quests where you can connect with old friends and meet new people. So check out Seeker's Notes today. You can find a link to the game and a link to their Facebook page in the description box below this video. By downloading Seeker's Notes for free, you'll be supporting Criminally Listed, and you'll also be getting one of the most ridiculously fun games available for your mobile device. Number 3. Dana Sue Gray. In February 1994, Norma Davis was 86 years old. Davis, who was a widow, lived alone in a gated community in Canyon Lake, California. On February 16, 1994, a neighbor became concerned because she had not seen Davis in 2 days. At the time, Davis was recovering from triple bypass surgery. The neighbor got into her home and she found Davis dead in a chair. Her murder had been brutal. She had been strangled and stabbed 11 times. 2 knives from her kitchen were still embedded in her body. Her throat had been slashed so severely that she was nearly decapitated. The police found no signs of a break-in or forced entry. So the police thought that Davis knew her killer or felt comfortable letting the killer into her home. In Davis's home, in some dust, the police found a shoe print. The footprint came from a small Nike shoe that most likely was a woman's shoe. Because it was from a woman's shoe, the police weren't sure if it was connected to the murder. No arrests were made in the wake of the murder. June Roberts lived in a gated mobile home community about half a mile away from Norma Davis. February 28, 1994 was Roberts' 66th birthday. Several people called her that day, but she didn't answer the phone. 2 of her friends went to her home and they found her dead body in a chair. She had been strangled with a telephone cord and beaten in the face with a wine bottle. There was no evidence that someone broke in or forced their way in. The police immediately suspected that the murders were connected. They happened within 12 days of each other, and the victims lived half a mile apart. Both victims were elderly women who lived alone in gated communities. They were both found dead in a chair, and they were strangled. Finally, it appeared that the victims knew the killer or felt comfortable letting the killer into their home. Just 10 days later, on March 10, 1994, Dorinda Hawkins was working alone in an antique store in Lake Elsinore, California. Lake Elsinore is 10 miles from Canyon Lake. A woman came in and she wanted to buy picture frames for her mother. Then suddenly, the woman attacked Hawkins and wrapped a phone cord around her throat. After Hawkins lost consciousness, the woman stole $5 from her wallet along with her credit cards. She also emptied the register, which had about $25 in it. She then left the store. Hawkins ended up surviving the attack, and she called the police. She described her attacker to a police sketch artist, and the sketch was printed in the newspaper and shown on the local news. The police thought that because she had been strangled with a telephone cord, her attack was possibly connected to the two murders, but once again, no arrests were made. Sun City, California is about 9 miles away from Canyon Lake, and in a lot of ways, the two cities are similar. They both have large populations of retirees, and there are plenty of golf courses nearby. 87-year-old Dora Beebe was one of the residents of Sun City. On March 16, 1994, just 6 days after Dorinda Hawkins was attacked, 87-year-old Beebe went to a doctor's appointment and then returned home. On that day, several years earlier, Beebe had lost her husband to cancer. After the death of her husband, she started dating a new man. In the spring of 1998, they had been together for 8 years. On the afternoon of March 16th, he went over to her home. He found her lying in a pool of blood in the bathroom. She had been strangled with a telephone cord, and she was struck 5 times in the head with an iron. There were no signs of a break-in or forced entry. It was clear to everyone in the area that a serial killer was preying on elderly women. The police knew that the killer, or possibly someone associated with the killer, was using the victim's credit cards. Using the credit cards, they would go on shopping sprees at department stores or go out to expensive restaurants. In some cases, they went out to the restaurant within an hour of the murder. Several people remembered that the person who used the credit cards was a woman in her 30s. She was white and had blonde, frizzy hair. Many people thought she looked like the sketch of the woman who attacked Dorinda Hawkins. Sometimes she had a young boy with her who was around the age of 5. One hairdresser remembered the woman coming into her shop after the sketch was released and asking for her hair to be dyed red. But the hairdresser said she couldn't do the dye job because the woman's hair was too frizzy and her hair could fall out. The lead detective on the case found out that a couple, Russell and Jerry Armbers, knew the first 2 victims. Jerry had been married to Norma Davis's son, Bill. Bill died in the 1980s, and Jerry continued to care for Davis even after her husband's death. Jerry had been at Davis's home just a few days before she was murdered. Jerry's second husband, Russell, had been good friends with June Roberts' husband before he died. After he died, Robert stopped going out as much, but Jerry and Russell still saw her every so often. The detective asked Jerry if she knew anyone who fit the description of the killer. At first, she said she didn't. Then on March 16, 1994, Jerry told the detective that the description sounded like her stepdaughter, 36-year-old Dana Sue Gray. Dana Sue Armbers was born in December 1960 in California. Her mother, Beverly, was a former beauty queen, and her father, Russell, was a hairdresser. Beverly was an erratic woman who abused prescription drugs. She would often max out her husband's credit cards. Beverly was a difficult person to get along with, and she didn't have a single friend in their neighborhood. One day, when Dana was 2 years old, her father came home and found Beverly physically fighting with a neighbor. They were rolling around in the gutter. This was the last straw for Russell, and he left Beverly shortly afterward. After that, Russell didn't see Dana much. Dana had behavioral problems at school. She would get into fights with other students, and she skipped quite a few days. When Dana was in her preteens, her mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. Beverly died when Dana was 14. The time that her mother spent in the hospital inspired Dana to become a nurse. After the death of her mother, Dana moved in with her father. When Dana was 16, she became obsessed with skydiving. Dana ended up living with her father and stepmother for 2 years. But then Dana and her father got into a fight because he had found marijuana in her bedroom. She left home and moved in with her 23-year-old boyfriend. Dana graduated from high school in 1976 and then went to college. She got a degree in nursing in 1981. A few weeks after graduating, Dana got a job as a nurse at a hospital in Corona, California. In 1986, Dana's father, Russell, got married to Jerry. Not long afterward, Dana started dating a man named Tom Gray. Tom had 2 jobs. He was a professional ultralight aircraft pilot, and he was also a heavy equipment operator for a construction company. In August 1987, Tom and Dana bought a house together, and 2 months later, they were married. Their marriage wasn't without its share of problems. Dana liked to spend more money than they were making, and their financial problems led to fights. Dana also started to drink heavily. The couple tried to conceive for years. Dana got pregnant twice, but she ended up miscarrying both times. In early 1991, Tom, who had played drums for years, started a new band. One of the band members was a man named Jim Wilkins, and he had a young son named Jason. In the spring of 1992, Tom and Dana split up. Over the next several months, Dana would jump back and forth between living with Jim Wilkins and Tom. In early 1993, Dana and Tom's relationship was officially over, and she moved in with Jim. She was drinking more than she had been with Tom, and she was abusing prescription drugs. To support her drug habit, Dana stole drugs from her workplace. In the summer of 1993, Dana and Tom filed for divorce. They also filed for bankruptcy. In November 1993, Dana was fired from her job at the hospital because the staff had figured out she was stealing drugs. About 4 months later, the murders started. After Dana was identified by her stepmother as the possible killer, she was arrested and her home was searched. They found Dora Beebe's credit card and a bunch of newly purchased items. Some of the items had been purchased using June Roberts' credit card. Dana Gray was charged with the murders of June Roberts and Dora Beebe. She was the prime suspect in the murder of Norma Davis, but the case against her wasn't as strong as the other 2 murders. If she were to be convicted of the 2 murders, she would have been sentenced to death, so the police and the district attorney felt that charging her with the 2 murders was good enough. Initially, Dana Gray pleaded not guilty. But then, a year later, in March 1995, she pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Dana ended up talking to several psychiatrists about the murders. She said that she killed the women because she was addicted to shopping. After every attack, she went on a shopping spree with her victims' credit cards. Dana knew June Roberts because her father and stepmother were friends with her. She got into Roberts' home by telling her she wanted to borrow a book about dealing with her alcoholism. As Roberts looked for the book, Dana attacked her. As she was murdering the 66-year-old woman, the 5-year-old son of her boyfriend, Jason Wilkins, was sitting in her car outside of Roberts' home. After the murder, they went out for lunch, and Dana got Jason a haircut. The only person Dana murdered that she didn't know was Dora Beebe. Dana explained that she knocked on Beebe's door and told her she was lost. Beebe let Dana inside, and while she looked for a map, Dana attacked her. On September 9, 1998, Dana Gray shocked everyone by pleading guilty to the murders of June Roberts and Dora Beebe. In exchange for pleading guilty, she received life without parole. At the time of this video, 62-year-old Dana Sue Gray is incarcerated at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla, California. Number 2. Juana Barraza. In 1998, 3 elderly women in Mexico City, Mexico were murdered. They had been strangled to death with some type of ligature, like a cable or tights. At the time, the murders were not big news in Mexico City. The city's murder rate was high, and the victims weren't high profile, so the murders did not garner much media attention. Over the next 4 years, more elderly women in Mexico City were strangled to death. It was usually 2 to 3 per year. Once again, they weren't major news stories. In 2003, depending on the source, there was 9 to 12 murders. They were all elderly women who were strangled with some type of ligature. Usually, they were strangled with something that happened to be laying around the victim's home. In November 2003, the people realized that there might be a serial killer who was preying on elderly women. One reason it took the police so long to determine that there was a serial killer is that serial murders are relatively rare in Mexico. The police assumed that the serial killer was a man. They called him El Malvajitas, or the little old lady killer. The police thought that the serial killer was a man, even though several people saw someone around the crime scenes around the time of the murders, and they said that the killer was a woman. They said she was tall and stocky with short hair. In December 2003, they released a sketch of the killer. The police thought that the killer was a man who disguised himself by dressing up like a female nurse. He would gain entry to their homes by pretending to be someone with an economic assistance program for senior citizens. However, at the time, the police didn't make this information public. Also, besides releasing the sketch, they did not do much to investigate the serial murders. In 2004, 2 people were arrested for the murders of elderly women. In April, a woman gained access to the home of an elderly woman and strangled her to death. In September, a man who disguised himself as a female nurse got into the home of 2 elderly women. He strangled both to death with a pair of tights. But neither of these people was the serial killer. The serial killer had left their fingerprints at many of the crime scenes. The fingerprints of the 2 killers did not match the serial killer's fingerprints. Depending on the source, it's believed that another 14 to 17 elderly women were strangled to death in 2004. By August 2005, it was thought that the victim count had reached 41. That month, the police decided to step up their investigation. They released 2 more sketches. They also spoke for the first time publicly regarding the killer's MO. They said that the killer was gaining entrance to the victim's home by dressing like a female nurse and saying he was from a social benefit program. They also said that the killer was a gay man. The murders also became a political issue. One political party said that serial killer was on the loose and not enough was being done to catch him. The other group said that there was no serial killer and it was just a panic created by their opponents. In the latter part of 2005, a special task force was started to find the serial killer. In October 2005, 46 people, mostly male sex workers and transvestite sex workers, were arrested. They were released after their fingerprints didn't match the serial killer's fingerprints. 3 weeks later, 59 transvestites were arrested. They were all cleared as suspects. In November 2005, the police released a 3D model bus based on the description of the killer, but it did not lead to an arrest. By the end of 2005, it's believed that 48 women, all over the age of 60, were murdered by the same person. On January 25, 2006, a man came home in the middle of the day. He was renting a room from 82-year-old Ana Maria de los Reyes Alfaro. When he came home, he noticed a woman walking out of the door. When he got inside the home, he found his landlady dead. She had been strangled to death with a stethoscope. The man started screaming and he chased after the woman. 2 police officers were in the area and they came to the man's aid. They arrested the woman. She was identified as 48-year-old Juana Barraza. Barraza was born in December 1958 in a small town outside of Mexico City. Her mother was an abusive alcoholic. When she was 12, her mother sold her to a man for 3 beers. Barraza became pregnant for the first time when she was 16. She gave birth to a son. She went on to have 3 more children. When her eldest son was 12 years old, he was mugged by a group of drunk men. The men ended up killing him. Barraza witnessed the murder. For work, Barraza was a maid and sold popcorn. She was also a professional wrestler. She wrestled under the name La Dama de Silencio, which translates to the Silent Lady. On March 31, 2008, although Barraza was the suspect in 49 murders, she was convicted of 16 murders. She was convicted in those cases because her fingerprints were found at the crime scene or eyewitnesses placed her there. She was sentenced to 793 years of prison, which is the longest prison sentence for any killer in Mexico. However, Mexico has a maximum 50-year sentence for life imprisonment, so she could be released in 2057. If she lives that long, she'll be 100 years old. Juana Barraza is considered Mexico's first female serial killer. Her arrest and conviction were big news in Mexico. In 2015, Barraza was in the news again because she was getting married. A 74-year-old man who was incarcerated in the same prison had romantically wooed her through letters. The man was serving a sentence for murdering another man in the prison. News of the marriage was big in the Mexican tabloids, who hailed it as a bizarre love story. But then, just over a year later, Barraza filed for divorce. She revealed that she and her husband had never laid eyes on each other before they got married. In the year following the wedding, they only saw each other 3 times for about 40 minutes total. Juana Barraza is still incarcerated. She apparently sells tacos that are popular among the inmates. Number 1. Shirley Winters. Shirley Barron was born in February 1958 in South Onondaga, New York. She was the third of 4 children. Her father was a drywall contractor and her mother was a homemaker. At the beginning of January 1966, Shirley was 7 years old. Her brother Peter was 11, her sister Joyce was 10, and her sister Lita was 4. On the night of January 25th, 1977, 7-year-old Shirley stayed at her maternal grandparents' home. Their home was about half a mile away from her family's home. That night, her father was out of town on a job. Shirley's mother, Marilyn, was home with the 3 other children. Marilyn's father, Lloyd, called Marilyn at about 11:30 that night, and nothing seemed to be wrong. The next morning, at 8:30, Lloyd called his daughter again. He wanted to tell her that the school bus was delayed by half an hour because of the weather. But no one answered the phone. He assumed that they were just getting ready for school, and he didn't think of it again. That evening, another one of the children was supposed to spend the night at the grandparents' home. But they didn't show up, and no one at the house answered the phone. Lloyd called Marilyn's sister and her husband. They had children who attended school with the Barron children. They learned that Peter, Joyce, and Lita didn't attend school that day. Lloyd asked them to go check on the family. When they got there, they found that the house was dark and locked up. They broke a window and got into the home. In one bedroom, they found 32-year-old Marilyn on the floor at the foot of the bed. In the bed were the bodies of 10-year-old Joyce and 4-year-old Lita. In another bed in a different bedroom was the body of 11-year-old Peter. Marilyn's sister and her husband called for help. Marilyn was taken to the hospital and placed in intensive care. Sadly, it was too late for the children. They had all died from carbon monoxide poisoning. The police investigated, and they believed that one of the family's dogs got into a crawl space under the house. The dog damaged one of the furnace pipes, which created a blockage. As a result, carbon monoxide leaked into the cellar and then seeped into the rest of the house. Marilyn Barron survived the ordeal. Shirley Barron was left as an only child. 11 years later, in 1977, when Shirley was 18 years old, she married a man named Ronald Winters Jr. That following year, Shirley was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for the first time. She was released after an undisclosed amount of time. As the summer of 1979 was coming to an end, Ronald and Shirley had 2 children, 3-year-old Colleen and 18-month-old John. On September 12, 1979, the family was staying at Shirley's parents' cottage on Hyde Lake in Teresa, New York. That afternoon, Ronald was at work. Shirley said she was asleep on the couch when a fire broke out. Her 2 children, Colleen and John, were in a bedroom. Shirley said that after the fire broke out, she tried to get into the bedroom, but she couldn't. A neighbor and his son came to help. They also tried to get into the bedroom, but they couldn't. The neighbor ended up being hospitalized with cuts and bruises. Sadly, Colleen and John Winters did not survive the fire. There was an investigation into the fire, but no source could be found. It was labeled as suspicious. Ronald's parents came to the site of the fire as soon as they heard about it. Ronald's mother noticed that Shirley didn't smell like smoke. there was something else odd about the fire. The day before, there had been a house fire about 50 miles from the cabin. Leo and Pam Gotham's family lived in Russell, New York. A fire broke out in their home, and 3 of their children, 13-year-old Leo, 9-year-old Patty, and 5-year-old Zan, were all killed. 2 of their other children were placed in the hospital. One had burns on 60 to 70% of her body, but she survived. At the time, the investigators thought that the fire was started by a piece of kindling that got away from the wood stove. Why this is odd is that Shirley was good friends with the Gothams, and she had visited them several times at their home. Shortly after Shirley and Ronald's children died, they split up. But when the fire happened, Shirley was pregnant. She gave birth to a son named Ronald Winters III on June 18, 1980. 5 months later, in November 1980, Shirley and the baby were living in a trailer in Otisco, New York. On November 21st, Shirley called 911 because 5-month-old Ronald had stopped breathing. He was later pronounced dead. The cause of death was labeled as sudden infant death syndrome, also known as SIDS. After the death of her 3rd child, Shirley moved into a different trailer in the same park. On January 3, 1981, the fire department was called to the trailer. A fire had been started in 2 different areas of her trailer. The trailer fire was considered arson. Just over a month later, on February 10, 1981, there was another fire in the trailer where Shirley was living. This time, she was charged with 3rd-degree arson. Nearly 20 months later, on November 9, 1982, Shirley's trailer once again caught fire. She was again charged with 3rd-degree arson. She pleaded guilty to criminal mischief for both charges, and she was given 3 years of probation. Although Ronald and Shirley had split up, they continued to see each other, and they were physically intimate. On May 24, 1984, Shirley gave birth to a daughter, Joy. Less than a year later, on May 2, 1985, she gave birth to a daughter, Ashley. In November 1986, Shirley and her 2 daughters were living in an apartment complex in Marcellus, New York. On November 12th, the building caught fire and it was destroyed. No deaths or injuries were reported. The cause of the fire wasn't determined, but it was labeled suspicious. On October 3, 1987, Shirley gave birth to a son, Clayton. Not long afterward, Shirley and Ronald finalized their divorce. Shirley and her 3 children moved into an apartment inside a house in Syracuse, New York. A month later, on November 2, 1989, a fire broke out in the building's storage area. Shirley managed to get her 2 youngest children, Ashley and Clayton, out of the building, but she claimed she lost Joy in the confusion. Luckily, Joy, who was 5 years old, managed to make it out by herself. Joy later said that she was in her mother's bed when the fire started. She said that her mother told her to stay in the bed, but she decided to get out. Investigators determined that the fire was an act of arson. Months later, on January 8, 1990, there was yet another fire in the home where Shirley and her children lived. Once again, it was determined that the cause of the fire was arson. After this fire, Shirley lost custody of her 3 children, and they were sent to live with their father, Ronald. Shirley subsequently checked herself into a psychiatric hospital. She was charged with arson regarding the fire in November 1989, where her daughter Joy almost died. Between March 1990 and October 1990, 3 more fires broke out in the homes where Shirley was living. In November 1990, she was charged with arson again, and she was held in jail while she awaited her trial. Her trial ended in a mistrial because the jury was deadlocked. At her second trial in August 1991, she was acquitted. In November 1991, about 2 months after Shirley was acquitted, she was charged with arson for the 4th time. This fire happened at a bowling alley in Camillus, which is a town in New York. Not much damage was done, and luckily no one was hurt. It's unclear what happened with those charges. In February 1997, Shirley's mother, Marilyn, who was a widow, died in a car accident. Shirley inherited her house in Onondaga. A few months later, on April 27, 1997, Shirley and her cousin were living in the house. Suddenly, a fire broke out. Both Shirley and her cousin got out of the house unharmed. Once again, Shirley was charged with arson. In August 1997, she pleaded guilty to second-degree arson. She was sentenced to 8 years of prison. Shirley Winters was paroled sometime in 2004. But then, a lighter was found in her possession, which was a violation of her parole, so she was sent back to prison. Shirley was paroled again in September 2005. At the end of November 2008, Shirley was living with some friends in Pierpoint, New York. Also living there was her friend's daughter, Connie Gollinger, and her grandson, Ryan Rivers. On November 28, 2008, Ryan was just 3 days shy of his 2nd birthday. At about 5 p.m., Ryan's mother, Connie, went to check on Ryan, who should have been in the playroom. Along the way to the playroom, she passed the washroom and saw Shirley walk out of it. Connie didn't find Ryan in the playroom, so she started looking around the house. She found Ryan lying on his back in the bathtub in 2 inches of water. He was not breathing. Ryan was rushed to the hospital, but sadly, he was pronounced dead not long afterward. At first, the family thought that his death was just a tragic accident. But they thought that the accident was very bizarre. When Connie found her son, he was lying on his back in the tub that had 2 inches of water in it. So the water wasn't above his face. Only his backside and his hair were wet. His shoes were dry. Also, Ryan was afraid of water, so they thought it was odd he would get into the tub by himself. The medical examiner determined that the cause of death was drowning. After the autopsy, the body was sent to a funeral home. The funeral director noticed suspicious bruises on the boy's body. Because of the bruises, a second autopsy was performed. The medical examiner thought that Ryan had too much water in his lungs. Had he accidentally drowned, there would have been less water. The medical examiner also found traces of rubbing alcohol in Ryan's bloodstream. The medical examiner thought that someone may have rendered Ryan unconscious with the alcohol and then drowned him in the bathtub or the toilet. After the autopsy, the body was sent back to the funeral home, and 12 days after Ryan's death, a wake was held for him. At the wake, his aunt noticed strange bruises on his forehead. After Ryan's death, Shirley moved into a trailer. A few weeks after she moved there, a neighboring trailer caught on fire. Shirley attempted suicide by overdosing on pills shortly after the fire, but she survived. In February 2007, investigators from 3 counties discussed Shirley Winters and her seemingly tragic past. In 1979, 2 of her children were killed in a suspicious house fire. This was the day after her friend's 3 children were killed in a house fire. Since 1979, 18 suspicious fires broke out when Shirley was around. 2 years after her children were supposedly killed in the deadly blaze, her 5-month-old baby supposedly died when she was alone with him. Then Ryan Rivers mysteriously drowned in a home where Shirley happened to be staying. Was Shirley Winters just incredibly unlucky, or was something more sinister going on? The police thought that there was just too many coincidences, and they started investigating all the deaths. In March 2007, the police had the bodies of Shirley's 3 children exhumed. 2 weeks later, Shirley Winters was charged with second-degree murder regarding the death of her son, Ronald Williams III, who died in November 1980. The autopsy revealed he had been smothered. The autopsies also revealed that Colleen and John, who died in 1979, had suffered blunt force trauma injuries to the head before the fire was started. But she was not charged in connection with these deaths. In August 2007, Shirley was charged with second-degree murder for the drowning death of 23-month-old Ryan Rivers. Shirley ended up making a plea deal. In April 2008, Shirley pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter in both cases. As part of the plea deal, the district attorney would not charge her in connection with the murders of Colleen and John. For the death of Ryan Rivers, Shirley was sentenced to 20 years of prison. Regarding the death of her son, Ronald, she was sentenced to 8 years and 4 months to 25 years in prison. She was allowed to serve both sentences concurrently. Shirley Winters was also investigated for the deadly blaze in 1979 that killed the 3 Gotham children the day before her 2 children were killed. The police did not find any evidence to connect her to the fire. The Gotham family was asked if they thought if Shirley started the fire. They said that they did not think so, and they did not see her that day. Shirley has never been charged with any crimes related to that fire, and at the time of this video, there are no plans to charge her with any further crimes. Criminologists think that Shirley Winters is unique for several reasons. First, she is a female serial killer, which is rare. Only about 10% of serial killers are female. Secondly, she is not just a serial killer, but she is also a serial arsonist. It is very uncommon for someone to be both a serial arsonist and a serial killer. At the time of this video, 62-year-old Shirley Winters is incarcerated at the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility for Women in Bedford Hills, New York. She'll be able to apply for parole in January 2024. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you found it interesting, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos just like it. Also, if you are looking for something new to watch, why not check out my new channel, Chapter Dark. The videos are mysteries that you can try and solve. Do you have what it takes to solve these mysteries? You can find a link to Chapter Dark in the description box below. But that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.